Hello, peoples of the internet. It's time for a super epic gamer sequel about Hexbugs. So, yeah. About a month ago, I think it was. I don't know. Time's completely and utterly dead. I made, this whole thing. I made this whole paper, and then this whole video about Hexbugs. And, yeah, that was the thing that I did. And guess what? That video is split up into two parts. This is the second part. This part mainly just covers what I couldn't mush into the first, mainly it's just, anatomy of the different types of nanos, so, yeah, that's all this is, basically. If you want to go see more, check out the first one, but, yeah. I'm also gonna have the Hexbug paper linked in the description again here, so, yeah, let's get to this, gamers.
Oh boy, time to do a whole voiceover. Reminder, you can read along with me using the link in the description to the Hexbug paper. So, yeah, let's do this. Variations and mutations. While Hexbugs are easy to identify, they still come in a wide array of forms. See appearance, last video. One way that these Hexbugs can vary is by color combinations. They can also manifest a variety of different patterns on the back of their exoskeletons, though a few patterns seem to be the most common. The most obvious variation, however, is the different subspecies that Hexbugs fall into. These subspecies can be placed into a small family tree, seen here. Hexbug Nano. The Hexbug Nano can be considered the quote-unquote original of the species, and additionally the subspecies that takes its namesake. All other Nano originated as a mutation of the original. Hexbug Nano can easily be identified by its iconic shape, illustrated here. These nanos also exhibit 12 legs, 6 on each side. The original nano was first identified in 2011. Variations. In addition to the pattern on their backs, each variation of Hexbug can also be further categorized based on whether they exhibit bioluminescence. The classification Galileo has a bioluminescent back, while the classification Newton shows no bioluminescence. Galileo Hexbugs will only shine in the dark. However, in the daytime they can be told apart from the Newton classification by the white, opaque color on the back of their exoskeletons. Via the pattern on their backs, Hexbugs can be classified into different phenotypes as well. It stands to reason that nanos with the same pattern are also more genetically similar to each other than to other nano. It appears that most pattern phenotypes are exclusive to either the Newton or Galileo classifications. The one exception to this rule is the quote-unquote mutation phenotype. It is estimated that 3 in every 8 mutation nano are of the Galileo classification, with the other 5 being of the Newton classification. While it is possible for a Hexbug nano to exist outside the commonly recognized phenotypes, these nano are considerably rarer. Anatomy. Hexbugs have a relatively small list of anatomical structures. These structures are grouped as those encased within the nano's exoskeleton and those outside of it. These structures are listed as the following. A. Frontal sensory tissue. This thickened tissue at the front of the nano's head is one of the main ways the bugs sense the world around them. It is built to withstand the brute force that nanos bump into various objects with during their waking hours. Sometimes, this tissue is naturally fused to the front of the exoskeleton, but not always. B. Cranial spinner. This structure in the Hexbug's head facilitates forward movement via vibration. The structure spins clockwise on a central axis. In a healthy Hexbug, this structure will be powerfully spinning during their waking hours, creating a prominent buzz or hum. Neural casing. This structure is theorized to be the central location of all higher brain functions for the nano. However, this has only been determined by the process of elimination and cannot be currently confirmed. D. Digestive converter. This structure processes energy in the stomach cavity into a form that can be used by the neural casing. It also appears to govern the Hexbug's rest/activity balance, receiving input from the neural casing on when and how to do so. E. Stomach cavity. This hollow portion of the Hexbug's body is meant to house the 357 batteries on which they feed. The structure can only house one battery at a time. Once a battery is consumed via the abdominal mouth, it will stay here until the nano decides it is in need of a battery at full power. F. Abdominal security structure. This is another structure whose functions aren't completely known. It has been shown to secure the abdominal mouth when the nano is not feeding. However, it is not known if this is the structure's sole purpose. G. Legs. The nano's legs are made up of the same fleshy material as the rest of their sensory tissue and share the same colors as it. On an average nano, 12 legs, 6 on their side and 6 on the right side. The legs can move on their own, but only do so during the nano's active state. The legs are by far the most fragile part of the nano's body and therefore are the most prone to damage. H. Sensory tissue. The Hexbug's sensory tissue can be found mainly on the back and top of the sides of the nano body. This tissue can manifest in a variety of saturated colors, with black seeming to be the most commonplace. I. Exoskeletal pattern. This is the location of the pattern on the Hexbug's exoskeleton. J. Abdominal mouth. The mouth is the gateway to the nano's stomach cavity. When unsecured by the abdominal support structure, the abdominal mouth can open, similarly to a human mouth, to consume/expel a 357 battery. Nano V2. The Nano V2 was the second evolutionary step for the Nano, identified in 2013. V2 are very anatomically similar to their slightly older cousins, the main difference being their somewhat different body shape and functionality of the legs. While as of March 2021, the V2 is much less common than the original Nano and the Nitro, they are still a class of their own and a crucial step in the Nano's evolutionary history. Variations. The V2 seem to not have as many pattern variations as the Nano they came from. Only 2 patterns have been identified by the shelf cortex thus far, and as of writing this appear to be unnamed. It is also important to note that neither of these Hexbug's variants fit into the Galileo classification, and instead can both be considered Newton. No Galileo V2 have been discovered by the shelf cortex thus far. Anatomy. The V2s share a very similar anatomy with the predecessor. All of the organs/structures found in the Nano can be found in the V2 as well, and are labeled by the same letter system. However, there are some obvious differences in a few structures. A. The frontal sensory tissue in the V2 is much thicker than in the Nano. It is also always attached to the exoskeletons, minus in some cases of physical damage. The FST also covers more of the front of the V2, likely as an extra protection measure. G. While the Nano sports 12 legs, the V2 only have 11. 3 of these legs are on the V2's back, giving it the ability to climb through vertical tubes. 2 more of those legs are partially grown and hang off the head. It is unknown what purpose these proto-legs serve. It is theorized they could be helpful for grasping 357 batteries, though this has not been further tested. Of the last 3 pairs of legs, 2 can be found just behind the head, and the last set towards the lower abdomen. H. Sensory tissue of the V2 has undergone some evolutionary alterations. It is thickened up around the upper and lower abdomen, leaving the midsection quite thin in comparison. This less rectangular shape is hypothesized to be more aerodynamic. Nano Nitro. One evolutionary step beyond the V2 is the Nano Nitro. The Nitro exhibits aspects from both the V2 and the original Nano. The Nitro combines aesthetics from both its ancestors into a sleeker form, as well as bests the V2 at its own climbing game. Despite these main differences, the Nitro is still pretty similar to the rest of the family. This subspecies of Hexbug was first discovered in 2017. Variations. From extensive research, the shelf cortex has uncovered 4 variations of the Nitro, which appear to have no name. They have been labeled here as patterns 01, 02, 03, and 04. There seems to be an equal ratio of Galileo to Newton Nitros, which share the same patterns. It is interesting to know, however, that the pattern 02 manifests differently dependent on what classification the organism falls into. This suggests that the genotypes for bioluminescence and exoskeletal patterns interact in a different way in the Nitro than they do in other subspecies of Nano. Anatomy. The Nitro, as far as is known, is not radically different from its ancestors internally. Rather, most of their differences are on the surface. Most of the changes are in the sensory tissue, body shape, and legs, which will be further elaborated on here, using the same lettering system as before for guidance. A. The Nitro's frontal sensory tissue has gone through yet another round of evolutionary sculpting. Like the V2, Nitro's FST is firmly attached to the front of the exoskeleton and covers more of it. However, instead of a right angle, the FST slopes at a 45-degree angle. likely as an improvement to aerodynamics. G. Instead of 11 or 12 legs, the Nitro has 13. The shape and placement of 11 of those legs is quite similar to that of the V2's. 2 proto-legs in the front, followed closely by 4 frontal legs, 2 in the back, and 3 on top. Unlike the V2, there are 2 new legs located on the back, above the back legs and where the stomach cavity would be. It should be noted that the central leg on the Nano's back has been significantly shortened, obviously not being as important after the introduction of the 2 new legs. It is thought that the alterations to the quantity, size, and placement of the top legs grants the Nitro more stability when climbing. H. While compared to the V2 and even the original Nano, the Nitro seems more bulky. However, when the 3 species are compared side by side, they are not quite as different as one may think. The shape of the Nitro's sensory tissue is most similar to that of the V2, both more thickness towards the back and midsection, giving it a blockier appearance like that of the original Nano. Nano Flash. Note: as the shelf cortex has a population of precisely 0.00 nanoflash, all data on this subspecies is collected remotely in secondhand. Diverging from the rest of the family tree is the nanoflash. The flash is a subspecies first discovered and properly named in 2020. This species, bearing most resemblance to the original Nano, is not a climber like its cousins. Rather, the Flash are notable for their great speed and their size, as well as their unique ability of converting some of their energy into light energy. Variations. There appears to be only one variation of the Nano Flash, that of which only falls into the Newton category by technicality. While the Nano Flash does exhibit bioluminescence, it doesn't come in a passive form found on the back of the exoskeleton. Instead, there is light created within the Flash's exoskeleton, which can be found in multiple different colors. Most of the variations found among the Flash isn't in pattern, but rather color. There are 6 color variations among the Flash, which dictate both the sensory tissue and exoskeletal color. For example, if a Flash was blue, both its sensory tissue and exoskeletal color would be blue. As of right now, only 6 colors of Nano Flash have been identified: black, blue, green, orange, red, and purple. Anatomy. As stated previously, the shelf cortex has a non-existent population of nanoflash to study, and therefore cannot make any anatomical claims based on certainty. We apologize for this inconvenience. In the circumstance where the shelf cortex obtains a population greater than or equal to 1 nanoflash, this section of the document will be updated as soon as realistically possible. Yes, I'm still holding myself to this. I'm going to update the doc. I'm probably not going to make a new video, but I will update the doc. Okay, gamers, you've survived my whole convoluted section on various types of nano anatomy. Congrats. If you still want to keep going, we have a whole section here that I wrote on quote-unquote ailments and injury, which, yeah, watch out for these. Don't let your nano suffer from this. Here we go. Ailments and injury. While the nano may be a uniquely built species, much different than many others on Earth, they are so susceptible to their own mortality and weaknesses. In this section, various ailments that can befall all nano will be summarized, as this document is intended to act as a hub for all information on the Hexbug Nano. Progressive Speed Degradation Syndrome, aka PSDS. PSDS can be summarized as the gradual loss of mobility that comes as a nano eats up the energy in the batteries they have consumed. While this process is only natural, it becomes a major hindrance to a nano if left unchecked. PSDS can chip away at a nano's mobility over the course of years, months, or even a few days, depending on their activity level. Progressive Speed Degradation Syndrome goes in stages. Stage 1 can be marked by when a nano has a noticeable decrease in speed. In the case of V2s and Nitros, it can also be marked as when they are no longer able to vertically climb. While a nano can still move adequately in this stage, they will struggle to keep up with their peers. Stage 2 is identified as when the nano can no longer move efficiently. Their cranial spinner moves slower, causing them to struggle to move. This is when they need a new battery the most. There's a much shorter span of occurrence to Stage 2 than Stage 1, and Stage 2 quite quickly leads right into Stage 3. Stage 3 has officially occurred once the nano's body ceases all movement, going into a comatose state. This state is meant to conserve energy for all processes which keep the nano alive. They will react to no outside stimulus during this stage. It is surprising how long they can go like this. Even if treated years after going into this state, the nano will, in most cases, bounce back into a full recovery immediately. The only treatment for progressive speed degradation syndrome is the nano obtaining a new 357 battery to obtain energy from. When plagued with this ailment, manually assisting them in consuming the battery is often necessary. After being treated, the nano will recover immediately, except for in some cases where other types of internal damage have occurred. Well, that was a little grim. Okay, next ailment, frontal sensory tissue tears, or FSTT. God, these acronyms. Frontal sensory tissue tears occur when the FST of a nano sustains damage which causes it to rip or tear. While the original nano is more susceptible to this phenomenon, it is possible to happen to any subspecies of nano. While there's no quote-unquote cure to this, the most effective treatment is applying any household superglue to the affected area and trying to piece it back together. Partial or full leg amputation. It is not uncommon for nano to sustain damage to their legs. In fact, out of 32 nano that reside in the shelf cortex, 5 of them have at least one full or partial leg amputation. Most of said nano colony came from previous hexbug owners. These injuries have no effective treatment, nor will they heal. However, most nanos will do okay with one less leg. The best kind of treatment for this issue is the preventative kind. All those who handle hexbugs should exercise proper care and caution. For existing cases of lost legs, the shelf cortex is currently looking into the possibility of developing 3D printed prosthetic attachment for nanos. Yes, I'm legitimately wanting to do that at some point, once I get my 3D printer fixed. Neck tears. This is another issue that arises when one is not careful handling a nano. In many cases, neck attachments can cause small tears to the neck if not properly worn and or strain the side of the sensory tissue. The best treatment is, again, preventative. One should make sure that when a nano wears such attachments, they are not too small and do not strain the sensory tissue. Acidic enteritis. Acidic enteritis occurs when the battery corrodes it while in a nano's stomach cavity. This condition has a higher risk of occurring the longer a nano has consumed a battery. A telltale sign of acidic enteritis is when a green, blue, white, or any color substance for that matter begins to grow within the nano's stomach cavity. It is highly recommended that one removes the offending battery. One should also manually clean out the stomach cavity to prevent potential damage spreading to the new battery or to other structures. Okay, that's actually most of the document. Let's take it to the outro.
Congrats, gamers. You made it to the end. There's a couple other small sections, mainly just a works cited page. There's also a stupid note that I made at the end. Feel free to look at both of those if you want. I cannot get silence in this household. I hope you enjoyed this mess. As always, there'll be more stupidity and creativity coming your way. Until then, I have a couple socials in the description and a link tree. I don't know, stay vibing, I guess. Normally I don't do, a bunch of nano-themed content or stuff, but if, anyone, from anywhere has any ideas, I'm willing to hear them. See ya. Stay vibing.